Hello, everyone. We are live today. If you're hopping on live, thanks for joining. You might notice that I have a new grand piano in the background. Actually, I don't. I'm using a virtual background today. I don't typically like to do that because it can be distracting with the movement. But speaking of movement, I am moving, and we have packing in full effect going on here. So that's why we've got the virtual background today. But all right, so today I want to hop on and talk about something that comes up in almost every coaching conversation. And I don't think that it gets talked about enough. We do spend a lot of time, and I spend a lot of time talking about when we're talking about communication skills. I talk a lot about, and you've probably heard a lot about communication skills and decision making frameworks and executive presence. And these things matter, they're important. But what I keep noticing in the leaders that I work with, and these are smart, capable, experienced people, the things that they struggle with don't have anything to do with not having a skill set. What it has to do with is pressure getting in the way of judgment that they already have. And this can happen in leadership when you are leading a team and you've got a lot of visibility. And this can also happen if you are the leader of your own life. When we feel pressure, well, then this can impact how we make our decisions and how we communicate and how we show up. So today I want to talk about why this happens and what it looks like in real time, some specific kinds of examples that you might see in yourself, and one practical habit that you can start using today. It is very simple, very easy, very effective. So stick around for that. Just going to see if anybody's hopping on here. Okay. If you are joining, or if you're joining the replay, feel free to, or if you're watching the replay, feel free to leave a comment, ask a question, and I will circle back to that. But today we're going to talk about why this happens and what it looks like. And one that is when pressure, when we are trying to make our decisions, trying to communicate, and there's pressure. And then one practical habit that you can take away. All right. Okay. First, I want to talk a little bit about the research, neuroscience, because this, I think, frames everything. When we think about stress and how it impacts our performance, we can put our own pressure on ourselves and think that we have a performance issue. But what happens is the stress can make us feel anxious, and then that anxiety impacts your performance and it makes it worse. Think about, if you're trying to do something and somebody's just standing over you, telling you that you're not doing it right. That's an example that we may have all experienced before. And this is why we don't like, some of us don't like micromanaging, because it puts this pressure where it makes you feel like someone is questioning your capability, and then you start to question your own capability. That's called the golem effect in organizational psychology. It's the self-fulfilling prophecy, but in a negative way. When we think that we're not going to do well, somebody else thinks that we're not going to do well, and then we end up, not doing well. And so while this is true, it's not the whole picture. Let's talk about what's actually happening. Research shows that stress impairs working memory, excuse me, and cognitive flexibility. And so these two functions are most critical in decision making, and it can impede stress can impair working memory and cognitive flexibility by as much as 20 to 30%. And so what that means is when you're under pressure, you're processing less information than you think you actually are. So you might feel like you're thinking clearly, but the part of your brain that's responsible for that clear thinking, for weighing options, for considering consequences, for accessing your own judgment, this is the prefrontal cortex, well, it's operating at a fraction of its capacity when we're under stress. And Daniel Goleman calls this the amygdala hijacking. You may have be familiar with his work. What's happening here is that your brain's threat detection system is taking over. And so the reasoning, more sophisticated part of how you think is going offline. Maybe not completely, but maybe just enough for you to not communicate or as well as you might like. And neuroscience research found that elevated stress reduces your ability also to filter relevant from irrelevant information. And so you're not just processing less, you're less able to sort what actually matters. Think about when we fear the worst case scenario, and then that fear, that stress, fear from stress, fear activated by stress. When we start making decisions from that fear of the worst thing, this is the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing that can happen might actually happen. So let me just not do the thing. Let me not speak up and have the conversation. Versus when we zoom out and we look at the facts. A lot of times we've all felt before, when somebody doesn't get back to us, oh, they're mad at me. Oh, I messed up. This is a very human feeling. We assume the worst case scenario. But when that assumption drives our decision, this is when we can get ourselves into trouble. But if we can instead take a pause, take a breath, zoom out, and look at the facts, then we can make a more aligned decision and communicate in a way that feels more aligned with what you actually want to say. Now, as a leader, when you're making decisions, we're talking about neuroscience and research, but you're not making your decisions in a research lab. You're making decisions in meetings in real time with other people watching. And so you've got that visibility kind of pressure on you, and there are stakes attached to your decision. So that pressure in leadership is almost always present, and it's present a lot in life too. If you are interested in the content here and you're not leading a team, but you are leading your own life, we're all the leader of our own lives, and you don't like the ways certain things are going, well, you have the power to make some changes. And the outcome that, I just sort of gave away the tip that that's the takeaway today. But stick around if this is resonating, because whether you're leading a team or leading yourself, the one step that you can implement today, I promise will help in helping you show up better, make decisions that are aligned with how you really feel and with what you really want. But when we're making decisions derived from pressure based on the feelings that pressure is bringing on, well, when we feel that pressure, it's not that we don't know what to do. The key, the real issue, is that we stop trusting our instincts in that moment. We stop trusting what we already know. We start to question ourselves. And there's a difference between not knowing and not trusting what you already know. And a lot of problems I see that leaders struggle with, and that humans can struggle with, is not that we don't know what we want to say or how we want to show up or the right decision that feels right for us, but it's we question ourselves. So we stop trusting what we already know. And so what are some examples of what this looks like, how this plays out in real time? I'll walk you through 5 patterns that I see most often. 1, avoided conversations. I think I've been passionate about this challenge since I was a little kid. I was always the one that wanted to speak up and address the issue, wanted to have the difficult conversation, even though it's hard. And this is not always a very popular opinion. You know, when you want to confront the issue and somebody else doesn't, it's a challenge. But avoided conversations in leadership, you know something needs to be said. Maybe there's a direct report that is causing some friction. Maybe there's senior leadership that you need clarity from on an initiative, or maybe it's a peer who you just don't feel aligned on a project. And so you're thinking about this conversation. You may have rehearsed the conversation, but you still haven't had the conversation. And it's not necessarily because you don't know what to say. I mean, you might not know exactly how to say it, but you know what you want to say. And then under pressure, though, the risk of saying it can feel bigger than the cost of not saying it, not having the conversation. And so that's actually the opposite, though. That's not true. When we don't have the conversation, it stays in our head. And it's a distraction, and it spills over into your other work initiatives, and it slows you down, and it also impacts how your state of mind, because you're going against yourself. When we don't speak up and say what we need to say, we're going against ourselves, and we're ignoring the information that we already have, which is our intuition, which is derived from pattern recognition, years of experience of gathering information that you already have. When we don't act on that, well, then we're in essence, going against ourselves. And then this has a lot of negative effects. It can lower your self-esteem, but that's more details on that another time. Okay, so that's the first one, avoided conversations. The second big problem that I see often is executing without clarity. Let's say your manager gives you a project, and you're trying to talk yourself into thinking that you understand it, because if you're being honest with yourself, you know that you need more clarity, that you don't fully understand the initiative, the outcome goal, the ask, but you don't want to look like you don't understand, so you just start anyway. You start trying to figure it out, but then you're not able to make progress, and you feel stuck. How confident are we in our ability to hit a target that we can't see? Now, we don't always know every step of our path getting there, but if we can't see a clear target, the clear direction, it's really challenging to get started. And then we tend to feel stuck. Or you do get started, you're taking action, but it takes you way longer than it maybe could have, and that's because you're not clear on what the actual outcome goal is. And then once you finally deliver the finished product, this is not at all what the person who gave the initiative had in mind. So then a ton of time was wasted. Your time, their time, likely then a lot of frustration involved. And this could have been avoided with a 60-second clarifying conversation at the very start. And that can sometimes be uncomfortable because we don't want to look like we don't understand. We don't want to look like we're incompetent, but we end up wasting so much time, our time and the other person's time, when we don't speak up and ask that question that we know that we need to ask. And I'll give you a quick example. Years back when I was working on a recruiting initiative, I had worked with this manager many times. We had a great relationship. So she probably thought that I had a solid understanding of what she was looking for, because we'd worked well together before. And a lot of times we tend to think that the other person knows what we mean. We think we're communicating clearly. A lot of times we're not communicating as clearly as we think, or the other person is receiving what we're sharing or asking for in a different way than we intended. Now, this was a super simple fix, but we were having leaders are busy, and so she was talking really, really fast, and I was having a little bit of anxiety because the call was going so fast, and I knew, okay, wait a minute, I need to slow down here. Now I would have slowed down the conversation during the conversation, but years back then I was just doing my best to take notes and keep up. So I logged on to Google Maps to look at the territory after we'd had the intake call, and I realized there were 2 bordering states that had the same names for some of the cities. And then I realized I'm very confused. I don't know what the geography is. So I need to call the manager back and have this clarifying conversation. Now, did I want to do that? No, because I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want to look like I didn't ask enough questions on the call. But think about if I had started on that search in the complete wrong geography, I would have wasted so much time. And then when I'm starting to deliver candidates that don't even live in the right place, that manager would not have been very happy with me, because now our search is really delayed. So yes, it was uncomfortable, but I caught the problem. Wait a minute, we're not aligned. I need clarification. And I called her back, got aligned. Yes, it was a little bit uncomfortable, but just another 5-minute conversation. It saved us a lot of time. So executing without clarity, that's the second problem that I often see. And then the third one is second guessing. And if any of these are resonating for you, drop a note in the chat or in the comments, and I'll come back to that. But second guessing what we want to say in a meeting. We know that we want to say something, that we need to speak up, but we don't say it. Or maybe we soften what we really want to say. And so then it's not direct enough for the person to even get what we're saying. Maybe we rewrite our email a bunch of times. Maybe we leave a conversation replaying it in our minds because we didn't say what we wanted to say. So, and this is communication can be challenging for all of these reasons and many more, but this second guessing is more of a trust problem. You stop trusting yourself, what you already know, what you already knew in that moment. When you don't say anything, you just create more, that's one that can lead to execution before you have the clarity there. And then the fourth problem that I often see is team misalignment. Maybe your team is not motivated or getting behind the idea, or you feel like you've got different people on the team moving in different directions, the same issues coming up. And this team misalignment is often derived from not asking those clarifying questions. It almost always comes back, this team confusion, in my experience, it often traces back to a communication gap that nobody spoke up about. So there was an expectation that was assumed rather than clearly stated. And maybe the direction made sense in your mind, but it didn't land the way that you intended. So when this happens and you feel like the team is going in different directions, or they're not getting behind the idea, probably because they don't understand it, how motivated are we to get on board with things and take action when we don't understand the why? Just like little kids always want to know why, it's important for us as adults to get back to that, wanting to understand why, because the why is what helps motivate us, what helps create that alignment and cohesiveness and collaboration. But when this happens, when you do get to that point where you're having some team misalignment, instead of pausing to say, wait a minute here, let's get aligned, let's clarify who has questions, give me some pushback, is the initiative feeling like it's a good initiative? Instead of stopping to have that, take that pause and get everyone aligned, everybody just keeps moving. So this is a big challenge that I often see. And then the fifth one is when we're making those decisions under pressure. This is when, so I'll call it pressure-driven decisions. This is when fear and intuition can get confused, and both show up very quickly. One immediately, and then one right after, like a second after, and both can feel pretty solid, pretty certain. But one is telling you, fear or intuition is telling you something real, and then the other one is telling you, guiding you to just make the discomfort stop. That's that threat response, where we're scanning for threat, and we want to keep ourselves safe and comfortable. Of course, the fear-based decision, the anxiety-based decision, that's the one that's working to make the discomfort stop, but it's not working to come to a resolution or bring us to a solution. It's not going to solve the problem. And so when you can't tell the difference between fear and intuition, that we make reactive decisions that are designed to relieve pressure, but not to solve the problem. So from those 5, if you're watching live or watching the replay, drop a number into the chat, or drop a phrase, whatever. I'll go back and share so number 1, avoided conversations. 2, executing without clarity. 3, second guessing. 4, team alignment. And then 5 is those pressure or fear-driven decisions. If any of these feel familiar to you right now, or maybe in the past, drop a note, drop a number, or a comment. To help lock this in, I'm going to give you an example, and this is a real example from a real coaching session. Of course, I'll keep it a bit high level to protect privacy, but it is a real situation. A leader that I was working with had been given an initiative for an upcoming meeting, and they were given some autonomy as well. Put something together, you figure it out, and then bring me, what you come up with. But we're having some misalignment on the team, so be prepared for some pushback. That might cause a little bit of a feeling of a boundary being pushed. Think about it, if that's the instruction that you were given, so that's going to invoke some fear. And then if we're taking our action deciding on our action based on that fear sort of natural threat response, well, then that can end up taking us in the wrong direction. Okay, so the client knew, okay, the goal matters, it's important. He wanted to make sure that he did well, but he was kept blocking off time in his day to work on that project, but still not making any progress. And it just felt like, like stress and like the other work was piling up and the stress was just continuing to build. So in our session, I said, okay, let's zoom out. And I asked, what is your outcome goal with this project? What is your outcome goal? And he paused and realized he didn't actually know. Now, the direction that he'd been given, plenty of autonomy and some ambiguity. Autonomy can be a positive thing. This can be a motivator in the workplace, but ambiguity, not so much, because again, how confident are we in our ability to hit a target that we can't actually see? So he had a general sense of what was wanted, but not enough clarity on the specific outcome to confidently execute toward the goal. Now, once we named that was the issue, once we surfaced, okay, this is the real problem here, we don't have a clear outcome goal. Well, then he also realized he did have his own outcome goal and something that he genuinely wanted to accomplish with the work, and the executive leadership outcome goal and the client's outcome goal were actually aligned. So the clarity was already there, but we just needed to slow down enough so that he could access his own clarity. And then once he got clear on a specific outcome goal, well, then he was able to start immediately and to execute and didn't feel stuck anymore. It was just moving forward, and it just felt much clearer. And this is, I see this often. This is not a one-off unique story. This is a pattern that I see a lot. So here's the practical tool that I want to leave you with today. And I shared it was very simple, and usually it just takes about 30 seconds. Now, sometimes it might take a little bit longer just to sit and dig a little bit deeper, but it will change how you show up in really almost every moment. And that is before any meeting, before any project, before any difficult conversation, what you want to do is set an outcome goal. Not the full agenda, not, okay, a general topic, but a true and specific outcome. And you ask yourself, what is it that you want to achieve going into this meeting, going into this conversation, sitting down to work on this project? What is it you want to achieve? And then take it one step further to really lock it in. Ask yourself why. We make our decisions based on emotions. And so maybe it's how you want to feel or how you want the other person to feel, but dig a little bit deeper, because you've got your outcome goal, but then the why is what backs it up. And if the why isn't really making much sense, well, then you probably don't have the right outcome goal. An aligned, when I say right, I mean right for you. I mean an aligned outcome goal, one that feels right for you. And when you have a want and a why that don't sync up, well, then you don't have a solid foundation from which to start. So some examples, when you don't have an outcome goal, this is when we go through meetings, but we don't decide on anything. We don't come away accomplishing anything. When you don't have an outcome goal, you start moving, trying to execute on initiatives that you don't fully understand. And this does not feel good. It makes you feel not very confident and like you're wasting time and frustrated. When you don't have an outcome goal, you can leave conversations wishing you had said something different. And then you can also move fast, but not in the right direction, or not move at all and stay stuck. Versus when you do have an outcome goal, you know what you're looking for in order to have that clarity before you get started. When you feel clear, you feel confident in executing. And if you set your outcome goal, then you likely know what you need clarity on. You know what question to ask. You know what that successful outcome looks like. And then you're able to, when you have an outcome goal, you can move forward with intention. And you'll have more momentum as well. And when you set an outcome goal, when you take the time to set an outcome goal, this very process, even if it's just a moment, it slows you down enough to access what you already know. If you're having that fear-based panic, worst thing that could happen moment, maybe panic is a strong word, maybe not, depending on the situation, but that's when we're operating from the fear-based emotional part of our brain. But when you pause and think, okay, what's my outcome goal? Well, you take a deep breath, you pause, you give yourself just the moment that you need, and that's often all you need to switch back to the reasoning part of your brain, which this process slows you down enough to hear the signal that's already there, your intuition. which is not necessarily that fluffy gut instinct. It's pattern recognition derived from your many years of experience, different things and behaviors that you've seen. So this is what I mean by getting clear. It's not always learning something new with the coaching or with mindfulness practices. It's getting clear and trusting what you already know a lot of times well enough to act on it. And if you don't know something, well, then you can access, oh, I need a resource. Who already has a good process or system for this? Or who's done this before? Let me reach out to them. Or who do I feel comfortable reaching out to as a sounding board? So even if you don't have the information, you do know where or who the resource is or how to find that resource to go get the information. But when we're operating from the emotional part of our brain, that fear, pressure-based decision-making part of our brain, we're not accessing something as simple something we already know, as simple as, okay, I need a resource. So I invite you to try this out this week before your next meeting, before you kick off your next big project, before that conversation you've been avoiding. Ask yourself, what is my outcome goal going into this? And you'll be surprised at how much pressure you can take off of yourself. And going into that conversation that you've been avoiding, I'm not saying it's going to be comfortable. The more you do this process, the more comfortable it will become. And then you'll see how much time you save yourself just having the conversation on the front end before it gets, bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's so much easier to achieve our outcome goal when you intentionally set your outcome goal, and then you can start to trust your instincts more. So if you have a question or a comment on anything that I talked about today, maybe something landed for you, maybe a situation that you're sort of sitting with right now, feel free to drop it into the chat, or you can leave a comment if you're watching the replay, and I will circle back. And keep in mind, just see if we have any comments here. The goal is not to eliminate pressure. The goal is not to eliminate the uncomfortable feelings. It's part of it. It's part of life. It's part of leadership. But the goal is to stop letting the pressure talk you out of what you already know, like not speaking up when you know that you need clarity. And you have more clarity than you're giving yourself credit for. The work is learning to trust it. So if today resonated for you, thanks for watching. And if you want to keep this going, continue the conversation, I'd love to connect. You can reach me at amyleemiller.com. You can also send me a message directly. Happy to continue the conversation. And hopefully I will be settled after my move, and I will be back on Monday at 2 p.m. I'm working toward getting same time each week. So we'll see you then.